The family that really matters. Those 5 words popped up on my screen alongside a photo of my daughter-in-law, Diana, smiling brightly next to my son, Michael, and her mother, Susan. Me, the woman who'd raised him, fed him, and given everything for decades, had been erased from the family equation with the coldness of someone wiping a mistake off a whiteboard. My fingers shook over the keyboard as I typed my reply. Good luck. I had no idea those 2 words would unleash a storm that would change our lives forever. An hour later, Michael's shouts echoed through my house. "Mom, what did you do? The lawyer just called me. About the house, the properties, everything." His face was pale as a ghost, his hands trembling as he showed me his phone, littered with missed calls from the bank. At that moment, I knew my revenge had begun. But to understand how I reached this breaking point, I need to tell you the story from the start. My name is Lillian Voss. I'm 63 years old, and I've worked like a mule my whole life to build the legacy my family took for granted. It all started when I was 16, pregnant and abandoned by my son's father, selling homemade pies on the corner of my neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. With those first dollars, I bought more ingredients, more hope. Year after year, dollar by dollar, I built a small empire. 3 rental properties and a bank account most would envy. Everything changed the day Michael introduced me to Diana. It was a Sunday in March, and the smell of my beef stew filled the house when I heard the click of her heels on my hardwood floor. That arrogant clack already warned me this woman would bring trouble. She appeared at my door in a tight red dress that looked like a second skin, her smile as fake as a dollar store knockoff. "So, you're the mother-in-law," she said, extending a hand cold as ice while her eyes sized me up from head to toe. No nice to meet you, or pleased to know you. She just labeled me the mother-in-law, like I was another piece of furniture in the house. Her long, perfect nails stood in sharp contrast to my calloused, scarred hands, which told the story of every sacrifice I'd made for my son. Michael, blinded by love, didn't notice the venom dripping from her every word. My son, my pride, the man I raised alone after his father ditched us when he was 8, was hypnotized by someone who already showed her contempt for me. But I chose to stay quiet and watch, never imagining I was nurturing a snake that would later bite me nearly to death. At that first dinner, Diana turned my dining table into a silent battlefield. "What an interesting decorating style," she remarked, eyeing my family photos with disdain. Her gaze lingered on the picture of me graduating as an accounting technician, the only formal education I could afford while raising Michael. "This stew has such a bold flavor," she added, pushing her plate away like it was poison. Each comment was a slap wrapped in fake politeness, but I swallowed my pride and smiled, thinking time might soften her. As I served dessert, I overheard her whisper to Michael, "Honey, does she always cook so homey? Back at Mom's, we have a chef who makes more refined dishes." Her words stabbed my heart like sharp knives. This woman didn't just dislike my cooking. She compared my modest home to her wealthy family's lifestyle. Susan, her mother, owned a chain of upscale salons and lived in a 2-story mansion in the fanciest part of town. After they left, I sat alone, clearing the plates Diana had barely touched. The silence in my house felt heavy, loaded with dark omens. Michael was too caught up in his girlfriend's fake smiles to notice how she treated me. I sat in my favorite chair, the one I'd sewn his school uniforms in to afford his education, and for the first time in years, tears rolled down my wrinkled cheeks. But I was a survivor of poverty, abandonment, and loneliness. I wasn't about to let a spoiled princess make me feel worthless in my own home. Little did I know that first humiliation was just the start of a 5-year nightmare that would lead to the most radical decision of my life. The months that followed were slow psychological torture disguised as family visits. Diana mastered the art of humiliating me with a smile. Every Sunday lunch, I became the target of her venomous remarks. She played the perfect daughter-in-law in front of Michael, but turned into a viper when he wasn't looking. "Oh, dear mother-in-law, still using that cheap face cream? Look at those wrinkles," she'd say, applying her fancy imported serum in my bathroom mirror. Her words were daggers wrapped in velvet, delivered in that sweet little voice she used to manipulate my son. I gritted my teeth and kept serving food, swallowing my pride like bitter medicine. Things got worse when they announced their engagement. Michael showed up one afternoon, eyes sparkling with joy, holding a bottle of champagne and talking about wedding plans. "Mom, I want you to be the first to know. Diana and I are getting married in December," he said, hugging me with the strength that reminded me of the boy he once was. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces, but I smiled and congratulated him, because that's what mothers do, swallow their pain to see their kids happy. Diana, of course, had other plans for me. In the weeks that followed, she started visiting alone, supposedly to plan the wedding together and bond. But the reality was far different. She'd sit in my living room like she owned the place, legs crossed, that fake smile plastered on her face, laying out the new family rules. "Look, dear mother-in-law, I know you've been alone with Michael all these years, but things are going to change," she said one Tuesday afternoon, sipping tea from my best china. Her nails tapped the table in a hypnotic, threatening rhythm. "A married woman needs her space, her privacy. There can't be a third wheel interfering in the marriage." The way she said third wheel made my blood run cold. I explained I'd never meddled in Michael's relationships, always respecting his privacy and choices, but Diana had it all figured out. "Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong on purpose. It's just, well, men can be so attached to their mothers, right? And that can cause issues in a marriage." Her words were like acid, corrosive and precise. During the wedding planning, Diana made sure I felt like an outsider in the most important moments. When we went dress shopping, she parked me in a corner while she and Susan made all the decisions. "This is a mother-daughter tradition," Susan said with a condescending smile. "I'm sure you understand." I sat there quietly, watching my daughter-in-law's mother take the place that was mine. The biggest humiliation came when they went to tour the wedding venue. Michael had invited me, but when we arrived, Diana feigned surprise. "Oh, honey, I didn't know you invited your mom. We'd agreed it'd just be the three of us," she said, gesturing to herself and Susan. "But she can come along, though she won't have a say since we've already decided everything." I became a silent spectator at my own son's wedding. On the wedding day, Diana ensured I appeared in as few photos as possible. Every time the photographer approached, she'd find an excuse to shoo me away. "Dear mother-in-law, could you check if the guests have enough water? Details are so important." I obeyed like a hired hand while Susan took my place in all the key family photos. After the honeymoon, the couple moved into an apartment I'd helped finance. Michael had come to me in tears, explaining his tech job salary wasn't enough for the down payment. "Mom, you know I'll pay back every cent. I just need a loan of $1,000. How could I say no to helping my only son start his new life?" But visits to their new home turned into weekly torture sessions. Diana had decorated the apartment in a sleek, modern style that clashed with my traditional tastes. "Careful sitting on that couch, dear mother-in-law. It's imported and delicate. We wouldn't want it stained or broken," she'd say every time I visited, treating me like a clumsy intruder in the home I'd helped pay for. During family dinners, Diana perfected the art of making me invisible. She'd talk only to Michael about things I knew nothing about, fancy restaurants they went to, artsy films they watched, trips they planned. When I tried to join the conversation, she'd look at me with pity. "Oh yes, dear mother-in-law, but you wouldn't know that place. It's pretty exclusive." Her words were subtle slaps that Michael never noticed. The final straw came when Diana started influencing Michael's financial decisions. One day, he showed up at my house with a proposal that chilled me to the bone. "Mom, Diana and I have been thinking. You're getting older, and we need financial security for the future. What if you put the properties in my name? That way, if anything happens to you, there won't be any legal issues." It was Michael's voice, but Diana's words. That night, alone in my house, I realized I'd raised a stranger. The boy who once cried when I cut my finger was now asking me to hand over everything I'd built through decades of sacrifice. But a mother's love is blind and deaf, and against all logic I signed the papers he put in front of me, trusting he'd never hurt me. That day I dug my own grave, though it took months to realize the depth of my mistake. Diana's words cut into my heart like daggers. My daughter-in-law was plotting to use a future grandchild as an excuse to kick me out of my own home for good. Her cold, calculated cruelty terrified me, but it also ignited a steely determination. If she could plan my destruction with such ruthlessness, I could plan my defense with equal resolve. That same night, I called Elias from my cell phone, hiding in the bathroom of my own house. "Elias, we need to speed things up. This situation is becoming unbearable," I whispered. My lawyer had been quietly reviewing the documents I'd signed, searching for legal flaws to void the property transfers. "Lillian, I've got good news," Elias replied, his voice brimming with hope. "We've found several irregularities in the contracts. First, there was no proper cooling-off period, which is mandatory for transfers of this size. Second, the restrictive clauses weren't clearly explained to you. And third, we have evidence you signed under emotional duress from family pressure." My heart pounded. For the first time in months, I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Keep documenting everything happening in your house," Elias instructed. "Every insult, every humiliation, every sign they're forcing you to live in degrading conditions on your own property. If possible, record conversations. Legally, of course." Over the next few days, I turned into a professional detective. I bought a small recorder I could hide in my apron and started capturing Diana's most incriminating conversations. The first recording was gut-wrenching. Diana was on the phone with her mother, Susan, plotting how they'd remodel their new house once they got rid of me. "Mom, I've got it all figured out," Diana said coldly. "When I'm pregnant, we'll tell the old lady the baby needs peace and quiet, and her presence is too stressful. If she refuses, we'll remind her she has no legal rights to the house, and if she keeps pushing, we'll threaten a restraining order for family harassment." Susan's response was even worse. "Perfect, sweetheart. I already talked to the architect. We can knock down her bedroom wall for that walk-in closet you've always wanted, and turn her bathroom into an office for Michael. This house will be stunning without all her outdated furniture." That recording was my most valuable treasure, undeniable proof that Diana had planned my downfall from the start. But I needed more evidence of the systematic manipulation she wielded over Michael and me. For weeks, I gathered material like an investigative journalist. One afternoon, while Diana was showering, I checked her phone, left carelessly on the kitchen table. What I found took my breath away. She had a text thread with a friend detailing her strategy to deal with the clingy mother-in-law. The messages were chilling in their calculated cruelty. "Girl, I swear this old woman drives me nuts, but I'm almost done with this mission," Diana wrote. "Michael's completely on my side now. I've convinced him his mom's toxic and controlling. Next step is the pregnancy. Once I'm expecting, I'll say I need peace and quiet, and she's got to go for the baby's sake. It's the perfect plan." My hands shook with rage and adrenaline as I snapped photos of the texts with my own phone. Each message was a confession of guilt, proof that everything had been premeditated. Diana wasn't just selfish. She was a master manipulator who'd studied every move to ruin my relationship with my son and steal my legacy. The most devastating evidence came by chance. One Sunday afternoon, Michael had stepped out to grab something for dinner, and Diana thought I was napping in my room. She took a call in the living room, unaware I was listening from the kitchen with my recorder on. "Yeah, Grandma, it's almost all sorted," Diana said in her sugary voice. "Michael's like putty in my hands. He does whatever I say. I got the house in his name, but he doesn't know that when we divorce, I'll get half of everything. Old Lady Lillian worked her whole life to build this estate, and now it's gonna be mine." Her next words froze my blood. "No, Grandma, I never planned to stay with Michael forever. He's spineless, no ambition, but he was perfect for getting what I wanted. Once everything's legally locked in, I'll divorce him, take my half, and marry someone on my level." That confession was the moment I decided it was time for total revenge. Diana hadn't just humiliated me and stolen my home, She was planning to destroy my son after using him to take everything I'd built. The war had officially begun, and she had no idea I'd been preparing for this battle for months. That night, while everyone slept, I sat in my favorite armchair and planned every detail of my counterattack. I had recordings, photos, bank documents, and witnesses. I had a brilliant lawyer who'd found the legal irregularities we needed. Most importantly, I had the iron will of a woman who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. My revenge would unfold in 3 perfectly coordinated phases, starting with the social media post Diana made. But before we get to that pivotal moment, let me tell you about the final months of preparation when I became a silent strategist, amassing legal weapons for the ultimate battle. Through October and November, Diana ramped up her psychological attacks. She no longer bothered hiding her contempt, especially when Michael wasn't around. One Tuesday morning, as I washed the breakfast dishes she'd deliberately left dirty, she sauntered into the kitchen with that venomous smile I knew too well. "Dear mother-in-law, I've got a proposal you'll love," she said, leaning against the table like she owned the place. "Mom knows this gorgeous retirement home with gardens and activities for people your age. Don't you think you'd be happier there, surrounded by folks who share your interests?" The way she said people your age felt like a death sentence. I responded with the calm I'd learned to maintain through months of torment. "Diana, this is my home. It holds my memories, my history, my entire life. I'm not going anywhere." But she was ready, as always, with a comeback. "Oh, dear mother-in-law, you don't get it. This isn't your house anymore. Legally, it belongs to Michael, and Michael's my husband. I'm the lady of the house now." Her words were a slap, but they also fueled my resolve to speed up my plan. That afternoon, I met Elias at his office to review everything we'd collected. My lawyer had been working tirelessly for months and finally had game-changing news. "Lillian, we've found the definitive evidence," he said with a triumphant smile. "The documents you signed have irregularities so serious any judge would declare them void. Plus, your recordings clearly prove you were a victim of family manipulation and psychological abuse." My heart raced as I flipped through the dossier he'd prepared. "But that's not all," Elias continued. "We've also discovered Diana's been using the properties as collateral for personal loans without your knowledge. She's racked up debts of over $50,000 tied to properties that legally still belong to you." My hands trembled as I grasped the scale of the scam. The plan was simple but devastating. We'd file a lawsuit for contract nullification, breach of trust, psychological manipulation, and fraudulent use of assets. Timing was critical, though. "We need a public trigger," Elias explained. "Something that undeniably shows Diana's cruelty and contempt toward you. Evidence so clear no one could defend her behavior." That trigger came on Friday, December 13th, a day etched in my memory forever. I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard Diana's laughter from the living room. She was with Susan and 2 friends, all giggling over her phone. "What a gorgeous photo!" one friend exclaimed. "You guys look like the perfect family." Curiosity drew me closer, and what I saw broke my heart into 1,000 pieces, but also sparked the fury I'd been holding back for months. Diana had posted a photo of herself, Michael, and Susan, all smiling happily in my own living room, with the caption that changed everything: "The family that really matters." The message was clear and cruel. I, who'd raised Michael alone for 25 years, who'd sacrificed my youth and dreams to give him a decent life, had been officially erased from the family Diana valued. The photo was deliberately taken to exclude me, and the caption was a public declaration that I didn't matter. My friends from the neighborhood called immediately. "Lillian, did you see what your daughter-in-law posted?" asked Nancy, my lifelong neighbor. How could she be so cruel? Others saw the post too, and supportive comments for me poured in, but I knew this was the moment I'd been waiting for. With trembling hands, I typed my response on my phone. Just 2 words that would change everything forever. "Good luck." The second I hit send, I knew I'd detonated a nuclear bomb that would shatter the perfect life Diana thought she'd built on my ruins. Right after, I called Elias. "It's time to execute the plan. It just happened. Exactly what we needed." My lawyer had been waiting for this call for weeks. "Perfect, Lillian. Within an hour, all the legal documents will be in motion. The property transfers will be voided, the bank accounts frozen, and we'll start the immediate recovery of all your assets." As Elias set the legal machine in motion, I braced myself for what was coming. I knew within hours Michael would get calls that would upend his life. The bank, the lawyer, the financial authorities, they'd all inform him simultaneously that he no longer owned anything, that everything had reverted to its original state. During that hour of waiting, Diana kept laughing with her friends, oblivious to the collapse of her world. "Look how I put all the nosy people in their place," she said, reading the comments on her post. "It's about time everyone knew who's in charge of this family." Her words stabbed my heart, but they also fueled my thirst for justice. At 2 o'clock sharp, Michael's phone started ringing. It was the bank, informing him the accounts tied to the properties had been frozen by court order. 10 minutes later, another call, from the lawyer who'd handled the original transfer, explaining serious legal irregularities in the signed documents. From the kitchen, I could hear Michael's voice, cracking with each call. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen? What does void contracts mean? What irregularities?" Diana stopped laughing, her face now a mask of growing terror. The third call sealed the deal. It was Elias, officially notifying Michael that a lawsuit had been filed to nullify the property transfers entirely, and until the case was resolved, all assets automatically reverted to their original owner. "Mr. Michael, your mother has the legal right to immediately reclaim everything that belongs to her," Elias said firmly. When Michael hung up, his face was ghostly pale, his hands shaking as he looked to Diana for answers she couldn't give. "What's going on?" he shouted at his wife. "Why's the lawyer saying Mom can take everything back? What did we do wrong?" Diana was in shock, unable to process that her perfect plan had crumbled in minutes. That's when Michael stormed into the house, yelling my name in desperation. "Mom, what did you do? The lawyer just called. About the house, the properties, everything." His voice was a mix of panic, confusion, and fear. At that moment, I knew my revenge had officially begun, and nothing in that house, now mine again, would ever be the same. "Mom, please tell me what's happening," Michael pleaded, tears in his eyes, kneeling by my armchair like he did as a kid when he'd broken something valuable. But this time, what was broken was far more than a vase or a plate. It was trust, respect, the family I'd built with so much love and let them destroy. I looked at him with the calm that only years of suffering and the certainty of doing the right thing can bring. "Son, sit down. It's time you know the whole truth," I said, pointing to the couch where we'd watched movies and talked when he was little. Diana tried to approach, but I stopped her with a look that brooked no argument. "You sit too, Diana. This concerns you especially." I pulled a thick folder from my bag, one I'd been compiling for months. It held photos, transcribed recordings, bank documents, and a detailed timeline of every humiliation I'd endured over the past 2 years. "Michael, I want you to see this," I said, handing him the first photo. It was a screenshot of a text message where Diana told a friend she'd use a pregnancy as an excuse to kick me out of the house. Michael's face crumpled as he read it. His eyes darted across the text, and with each line, his expression grew more horrified. "Diana, what is this?" he asked his wife, his voice trembling, but she sat silent, her face paler than the living room walls. "That's nothing compared to this," I said, handing him the transcript of the recording where Diana confessed she planned to divorce him once she secured half of everything. "Read it out loud, Michael. I want you to hear the words of the woman you say you love with your own voice." My son started reading, his voice breaking. "Michael's like putty in my hands. He does whatever I say. I never planned to stay with him forever. Once everything's legally locked in, I'll divorce him, take my half, and marry someone on my level. Each word was a hammer blow, shattering the image he had of his wife. Diana tried to defend herself with the same emotional manipulation she'd used for years. "Honey, that's not true. I never said those things. Your mom's making it all up to tear us apart. Can't you see she's jealous of our love?" But her words sounded hollow and desperate, like the last gasps of a cornered animal. I pulled out my phone and played the original recording. Diana's voice filled the room with crystal clarity. "Michael's like putty in my hands. He does whatever I say." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stared at his wife like she was a stranger, as if he'd just realized he'd been living with someone he didn't know at all. "There's more," I continued relentlessly. I showed him the bank documents revealing how Diana had used my properties as collateral for personal loans. "Your wife's been racking up debts to fund her lavish lifestyle. She owes $3,000, planning to pay it off by selling my house." The numbers were cold, hard facts, undeniable as steel. Michael stood and walked to the window, turning his back on Diana. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. "How could I be so blind?" he murmured against the glass. "How could I let her treat you like this, Mom? How could I be so stupid?" His pain was real, but it came too late. I wasn't done. The final blow would be the most devastating. I pulled out the latest recording, where Diana was on the phone with Susan, planning to turn my bedroom into a walk-in closet once they kicked me out. "Listen to this, son. Hear how they plan to erase every trace of me from this house." When the recording ended, Diana finally spoke, but not with her usual manipulative tone. Now she screamed like a wounded animal. "Fine, yes, it's all true. But you brought this on yourself, you meddling old woman, always in the way, always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Michael needed a wife, not a controlling second mother." Her words confirmed everything I already knew, but hearing them out loud, without masks or pretense, was liberating. "Thank you for your honesty, Diana," I replied, with a calm that infuriated her even more. "Now Michael can see who you really are." She exploded. "I don't care what you think. I deserve better than this outdated house and this mediocre family. Michael's a spineless loser, and you're a bitter old hag who doesn't know when to quit." Her mask had fallen completely, revealing the venomous snake she'd always been. Michael turned slowly toward his wife, and for the first time in years, I saw in his eyes the determination he'd inherited from me. "Diana, I want you out of this house right now. I never want to see you again." His voice was firm, free of the weakness he'd shown for so long. "You're kicking me out?" Diana screamed, incredulous. "This is my house. I'm your wife. You can't do this." But Michael had made his final decision. "This was never your house. This is my mother's house, the woman who sacrificed everything for me while you only planned to destroy me. Get out now before I call the police." Diana looked around like a caged animal, searching for a way out, one last card to play. She tried approaching Michael with crocodile tears. "Honey, we can fix this. I love you for real. Everything I said was out of spite. We can start over without your mom in the way." But my son was no longer the manipulable man he'd been. "No, Diana, it's over. You've lied, stolen, humiliated my mother, and planned to betray me from the start. There's nothing to fix." His voice echoed mine when I made tough but necessary decisions. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Elias, my lawyer, with a police officer. "Ms. Voss, we're here to formalize the recovery of your properties and officially notify the nullification of the contracts," Elias announced professionally. The officer held the legal documents that turned Diana's world into a nightmare. "Ms. Caldwell," the officer said, "you have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings and leave the property. Any attempt to stay beyond that will constitute trespassing." The words hit Diana like a social death sentence. She glared at everyone with pure hatred. "This isn't over," she threatened as she stormed upstairs to pack. "You don't know who you're messing with. My family has connections, lawyers, influence. I'll take back everything that's mine." Her words sounded like the desperate roar of a defeated beast. From upstairs came the sounds of drawers yanked open, clothes thrown into suitcases, objects crashing against walls. Diana was destroying what she couldn't take in a final act of childish revenge, but I didn't care anymore. Objects can be replaced. Dignity and respect, once lost, are far harder to reclaim. When Diana came downstairs, dragging her suitcases, the elegant, manipulative woman who'd entered my home 5 years ago was gone. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared from angry tears, and her emerald green dress was wrinkled from her rush. She looked like a stage actress stumbling off after the toughest role of her life. "Michael, please, think this through," she tried one last time, her syrupy voice perfected over years of manipulation. "This is all your mother's fault. She's tearing us apart because she can't stand you being happy with another woman. Don't you see she's playing with your mind?" Her desperate words bounced off Michael's newfound resolve like raindrops on a closed window. For a moment, I feared Diana's emotional manipulation might work again, but Michael had changed. The man before me was no longer the vulnerable puppet he'd been for years. "Diana, it doesn't work anymore. You can't brainwash me with your lies. I've seen the proof, heard the recordings, and I know exactly who you are and what you plan to do to me." The officer checked his watch with professional impatience. "Ma'am, you have 15 minutes left to leave the property." His words were a brutal reminder that Diana's time in my house was over. She looked around the living room she'd redecorated to her tastes, as if memorizing every detail for an uncertain future. "Fine," she said at last, her voice cracking but still laced with venom. "I'm leaving, but no, this isn't over. I'll sue you for defamation, psychological abuse, conspiracy." She pointed scornfully at Elias, who smiled with the confidence of someone holding all the winning cards. "Ms. Caldwell," Elias replied calmly, "I suggest you consult your lawyers before making legal threats. We have enough evidence to pursue criminal charges for fraud, financial manipulation, and psychological abuse. Any attempt at legal revenge will only worsen your situation." The smirk vanished from Diana's face as she realized she had no legal ground to stand on. She dragged her suitcases to the door, but paused at the threshold for one last volley of insults. "Lillian, you're a bitter, manipulative old woman. You've torn us apart, but Michael will realize his mistake. When he's alone and depressed, he'll remember how happy he was with me, and it'll be too late." Her words aimed to wound, but they only sounded pathetic. "Diana," I replied, rising from my armchair with all the dignity I'd reclaimed. "I didn't tear anyone apart. You unmasked yourself with your own words and actions. Michael isn't losing a wife. He's freeing himself from a con artist who saw him as a means to money." My voice was steady, no trace of the humiliated woman I'd been for so long. Diana glared at me with pure hatred, as if she could burn me with her eyes. "You know nothing about real love. You're a lonely, bitter woman who never got over your husband abandoning you. That's why you can't stand your son finding happiness with someone else." Her jab about my husband was the lowest blow she could land, but it had no power to hurt me anymore. "My husband didn't abandon me, Diana. He died in a car accident when Michael was 8. But even if he had, I'd rather be a lone, dignified woman than a married con artist planning to betray her husband," I said calmly. The shock on her face confirmed she'd never bothered to learn our family's true story. Just then, Susan pulled up in her luxury SUV, honking impatiently from the street. Diana's mother had come to rescue her daughter from the mess they'd created together. When Susan stormed into the house and saw the scene, her face fell. "What's going on? Why does Diana have suitcases? Who are these people?" Her questions tumbled out, as if she couldn't grasp the disaster's scale. "Mom, the old lady set a legal trap," Diana explained through theatrical sobs that fooled no one anymore. "She's taken back all the properties and they're kicking me out." Susan turned to me with the arrogance her daughter had inherited. "Ms. Voss, this is outrageous. My daughter is a married woman with legal rights to this property. You can't just throw her out." Elias stepped in with surgical precision. "Ms. Hensley, your daughter never had legal rights to these properties. The transfer contracts have been voided due to serious irregularities. Furthermore, we've uncovered that she used the properties as collateral for unauthorized personal loans, which is a federal crime." His words hit Susan like a legal avalanche. Her arrogance melted into terror as she realized the legal implications. "Federal crime? What are you talking about? My daughter would never do anything illegal." But her voice lacked conviction, even to herself. It was clear she knew more about Diana's financial schemes than she let on. "Ms. Hensley," Elias continued relentlessly, "we have evidence that you actively participated in the psychological manipulation of my client. The recordings include conversations where you suggest specific ways to pressure Ms. Voss into leaving her home." Susan's face turned white as paper. The officer checked his watch again. "Ladies, your time is up. You must leave the property immediately, or I'll have to arrest you for trespassing." His words were the final catalyst. Susan grabbed her daughter's arm and dragged her toward the door. "This isn't over," Susan shouted from the doorway. "We know important people. We have expensive lawyers. We'll take back everything that's ours." But her threats rang hollow, like the last roars of a wounded lion unable to hunt. "Ms. Hensley," I replied with a calm that enraged them further, "nothing here ever belonged to you. Everything you got was through deceit and manipulation. Now you're reaping what you sowed." My words followed them as they left my house for good. From the window, we watched them climb into Susan's SUV. Diana sobbed hysterically while her mother tried to console her, probably already plotting their next move. But I knew they had no legal ground to fight on. Elias had built an airtight case that would withstand any counterattack. When the SUV disappeared around the corner, a profound silence filled my house. It was different from the oppressive silence of the months of humiliation. This was a silence of liberation, of justice served, of dignity reclaimed. For the first time in years, my house felt like a home again. Michael approached me, tears in his eyes. "Mom, I don't know how to apologize for everything I put you through. I was blind, an idiot, a terrible son. I let that woman humiliate you in your own home, treat you like a stranger, and plan to steal everything you built." His pain was genuine, the first step toward healing our relationship. "Son," I said, taking his hands in mine, "a mother's love doesn't vanish with mistakes. You were manipulated by an expert. What matters is that you see the truth now and are willing to make things right." Deep down, I knew the wounds would take time to fully heal. The officer and Elias said their goodbyes after ensuring all the legal documents were in order. "Ms. Voss," Elias said before leaving, "legally you've reclaimed everything. The properties, the bank accounts, all are back in your name. Diana can't claim anything because the marriage happened after the fraudulent transfers." It was the final confirmation of my total victory. When Michael and I were finally alone, we sat on the couch where we'd shared so many happy moments when he was a child. The house felt strangely empty without Diana's toxic presence, but it also felt clean, like a stubborn stain had finally been scrubbed away. The weeks following Diana's eviction felt like living in a brand new world. My house, once a silent battlefield, transformed into a haven of peace where I could finally breathe without fear of humiliation or attack. But the outward calm didn't reflect the emotional storm raging inside me. Michael had temporarily moved back home while starting divorce proceedings. Seeing him walk the halls with that look of guilt and regret broke my heart. My son, once my pride and joy, was now a shadow of himself, weighed down by the betrayal of the woman who'd given him life. "Mom, how could you forgive me so easily?" he asked one afternoon over coffee in the kitchen. His eyes were sunken, dark circles speaking of sleepless nights. "I let that woman humiliate you for years. I failed you in the worst way possible." His voice cracked, the words too heavy to speak. I poured more coffee into his favorite mug, the one with faded superhero designs he'd used since childhood. "Son, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means not letting resentment consume my heart. You were a victim of an expert manipulator, just like I was. The difference is, she blinded you with fake love while she attacked me directly." But forgiving wasn't the same as trusting again. In those first weeks, whenever Michael tried to hug me or rebuild our old bond, A part of me tensed up. Memories of his silent complicity, the way he avoided my eyes when Diana humiliated me, lingered like ghosts between us. One morning, while sorting through the mail, I found a certified letter that chilled my blood. It was from a fancy law firm representing Diana, suing for unequal distribution of marital assets and psychological damages. My ex-daughter-in-law had followed through on her threat to fight back legally, and her high-priced lawyers had found a strategy to try reclaiming part of the estate. I called Elias immediately, who reviewed the documents with a detective's precision. "Ms. Voss, this was expected," he said calmly, though I caught a note of professional concern. "Diana's desperate and playing her last card, claiming that as Michael's wife, she's entitled to half the assets in his name during the marriage." I cut to the chase. "Can she win?" Elias paused for a few agonizing seconds. "Legally, her case is weak because the assets were obtained fraudulently, but some judges might consider Michael acted in good faith when he received the properties as a gift from you. If that happens, she could get a financial settlement." The thought of that woman getting a single cent of my estate enraged me more than all her humiliations combined. Over the next few days, I obsessively gathered more evidence. Every recorded conversation, every text message, every document proving her premeditated manipulation. Meanwhile, Diana launched a predictable, pathetic smear campaign on social media. She posted photos from when she seemed happy with Michael, paired with dramatic captions about toxic mothers-in-law who destroy marriages and controlling moms who can't let go of their sons. Her shallow friends chimed in with heart emojis and comments like, "Such an injustice, you deserve better." But truth has a way of shining through. Neighbors who'd witnessed my humiliation started commenting on Diana's posts, sharing the real story. Nancy, my lifelong neighbor, wrote a scathing comment. "I saw how this woman treated Lillian like a maid in her own home. What nerve to play the victim now." Support for me snowballed. People who knew my story of hard work and sacrifice defended me publicly. Lillian busted her back to give her son everything, and this opportunist tried to take it all, wrote the owner of the corner store where I'd shopped for decades. Justice was served, even if it came late. The tide of public opinion turned so overwhelmingly against Diana that she had to disable comments on her posts, but the damage to her reputation was done. Even her friends began questioning her privately, likely wondering if the stories of her manipulative behavior were true. Susan tried a different tactic. One Saturday afternoon, she showed up at my door alone, her usual arrogance replaced with a softer, almost pleading tone. "Lillian, we need to talk," she said. "This has gotten out of hand. We can settle things like civilized adults." I let her in but kept my guard up. Susan sat on the edge of the couch as if afraid to get comfortable. "Look, I know my daughter made mistakes. Maybe she was too harsh with you, but understand she comes from a different world. She's not used to, well, this simpler way of life." Her words were a mix of fake apology and veiled classism. "Susan," I replied firmly, "your daughter didn't make mistakes. She systematically planned to steal my estate and destroy my relationship with my son. That's not a cultural difference. It's a crime." Her expression confirmed she knew exactly what I was talking about. "What do you want Diana to do to fix this?" Susan asked, switching tactics. "She's willing to apologize publicly, drop the lawsuit, even pay you compensation for the trouble." Her words sounded like a desperate negotiator with no strong cards left. "I don't want her money, Susan," I said without hesitation. "I want her and you out of our lives for good. Your daughter had years to treat me with respect and dignity, but chose cruelty and manipulation. Now she must face the consequences." My firmness left her speechless. Susan tried one last emotional plea. "Think about Michael. He genuinely loved my daughter. Don't you think he deserves a second chance at happiness?" But her argument was as false as everything else she'd said. "Michael will be happy when he learns to value people for who they are, not what they pretend to be," I replied. When Susan left, I knew I'd won the psychological war. Diana's family had exhausted their manipulation tactics and now faced the legal consequences of their actions. But the victory felt bittersweet because it meant Michael had to live with the weight of being so thoroughly deceived. That night, Michael and I had dinner together for the first time in years without Diana's toxic presence. The conversation flowed naturally, reminiscing about his childhood, talking about future plans, laughing at inside jokes, only we understood. At times, it felt like the past 5 years had been a nightmare we'd finally woken from. "Mom," Michael said while we washed dishes, "I want you to know I'll spend the rest of my life making up for what I put you through, not just with words, but with actions. I want to be the son you deserved." His eyes shone with a determination I hadn't seen in years. "Son," I replied, drying my hands on the apron I'd used to cook his favorite meal, "you don't need to make up for it forever. Just learn from this and never let anyone manipulate you into hurting the people who truly love you." It was a hard but necessary lesson. That night, as I got ready for bed in my room, in my house that I'd finally reclaimed, I felt a deep peace I hadn't known in years. I'd won more than a legal battle. I'd reclaimed my dignity, my home, and the chance to rebuild my relationship with my son. But I knew the hardest part was yet to come. Learning to trust again and healing wounds that time and love would slowly mend. 6 months after Diana's eviction, my life found a new balance I never thought possible. The legal battle ended in a total victory. Diana not only lost her lawsuit, but had to pay legal fees and a fine for attempted estate fraud. Elias had built such a solid case that her expensive lawyers couldn't save her. News of her legal defeat spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People who once admired her supposed elegance now talked about her as a cautionary tale of what happens when you try to scam a hard-working family. "Truth always comes out," Nancy said at the market. "That woman thought she was so clever, but she didn't know Lillian." Michael slowly became the man I remembered before Diana. The divorce finalized without complications, since she had no legal grounds to claim anything. He'd lost weight during those tough months, but gained something far more valuable: the clarity to recognize manipulation. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he said one afternoon while we worked in the garden I'd reclaimed from Diana's grasp. "Not just how she manipulated me, but why I was so vulnerable to it." His hands worked the soil with the care he'd learned as a child when I taught him to plant my first roses. "Tell me what you figured out," I said, planting new flowers where Diana had tried to put exotic plants that didn't suit our climate. It was symbolic, restoring the garden's natural essence, just as we were restoring our relationship's warmth. "I think part of the problem was I never truly valued what I had," Michael continued. "I grew up seeing your sacrifices as normal, something moms just do. I never stopped to think about everything you gave up for me. The late nights working extra to pay for my college, the times you went without to give me the best." His words hit my heart, but filled me with deep satisfaction. It was the first time he truly grasped the magnitude of what we'd built together. "Son, I did all that because I love you, not so you'd feel indebted," I said. "But I'm glad you now see the value of the sacrifices we make for those we love." Michael's transformation wasn't just emotional, it was practical. He started contributing to the house's upkeep, not as a temporary guest, but as an adult son who finally understood his family responsibilities. He cooked on Sundays, fixed the leaky roof that had been a problem for years, and installed new deadbolts to secure our home. "Mom, I want to talk about my future," he said one night after dinner. "I've decided I'm not moving out on my own again. I want to stay here with you, help with everything, make sure you're never in a vulnerable spot again." His offer touched me but also worried me. "Michael, I appreciate that, but you're a young man," I replied with the wisdom of experience. "You deserve to find true love, start your own family, live your own life. I don't want my situation to hold you back or make you feel obligated to give up your happiness." He took my hands with the gentle strength he'd inherited from me. "Mom, staying here isn't a limitation. It's a conscious choice. For years, I thought independence meant moving away from you, but now I understand true independence is choosing where and who you want to be with. I want to be here, rebuilding what we almost lost. In those months, news trickled in about Diana and her family. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned Susan had to sell one of her upscale salons to cover the debts Diana racked up using my properties as collateral. Their family business took a financial hit that'd take years to recover from. Diana tried to start over in another city, but her reputation followed her. In the age of social media, stories of family manipulation and estate fraud travel fast, especially with documented evidence. Several potential suitors backed off after digging into her past. "Do you feel any satisfaction knowing she's paying the consequences?" Michael asked when I shared the news. It was an honest question, deserving an honest answer. "I don't feel satisfaction, son. I feel justice," I replied after careful thought. Satisfaction would come if I'd planned her downfall for revenge. But what happened was her own actions leading to the natural consequences. I didn't destroy Diana. She destroyed herself. The truth was more complex. A small, undeniable part of my heart did feel some satisfaction knowing the woman who'd humiliated me was now facing her own humiliations. But I'd learned revenge is like poison. You take hoping the other person gets sick. A year after the drama, I received an unexpected letter from Diana, handwritten on fancy paper she probably couldn't afford in her new financial situation. The letter was long, filled with apologies that sounded genuine, but also justifications showing she still didn't fully grasp her actions' gravity. "Dear Lillian," it began, "I know you probably want nothing to do with me, but I feel I need to formally apologize for all the harm I caused you and your family. I've had time to reflect and see that my behavior was inexcusable." Over 3 pages, it alternated between guilt and subtle attempts to blame her privileged upbringing and inexperience with working-class families. She clearly didn't understand that respect and dignity aren't class concepts, but basic human values. "I don't expect your forgiveness," it ended, "but I want you to know I've learned from this and will never treat anyone the way I treated you. I hope you find peace, knowing that, though it came at a high cost, your courage taught me a lesson I needed." Michael read the letter when I showed it to him, and his reaction was telling. "Parts sound genuine, but she's still trying to minimize what she did," he observed with a maturity that made me proud. "It's like she wants credit for finally admitting the obvious." I chose not to respond, not out of cruelty, but because Diana needed to live with her actions' consequences without seeking absolution from those she'd hurt. Some life lessons are only learned in the solitude of personal reflection. Today, as I write this in my journal, I can say my life has found a happiness I never thought possible after so much pain. My house is a home again, filled with mutual love and respect. My garden blooms with the plants I chose. My kitchen smells of the meals I love to cook, and my living room is decorated with the memories that truly matter. Michael has started dating a new woman, Fiona Kessler, an elementary school teacher who treats me with the respect and warmth a mother-in-law deserves. The difference is striking. While Diana entered my home like an invader conquering enemy territory, Fiona arrives with humility and genuine interest in our family's story. "Ms. Lillian, could you teach me how to make that stew Michael loves?" she asked last Sunday. "I want to learn the recipes that matter to him, the ones tied to his childhood memories." Her words were music to my ears, the sound of a woman who understands that loving a man means respecting those who shaped him. In the end, Diana did me an unwitting favor. Her cruelty forced me to find a strength I didn't know I had. It taught me to value my own dignity and showed me it's never too late to stand up to abusers. Most importantly, it gave me back my son in a deeper, more genuine way than we'd ever had. They thought they could destroy me, but they only helped me build walls no one will ever breach again. Behind those walls, protected by the wisdom of years and battles won, I now live a life filled with the peace that comes from valuing yourself as much as you value others.